let's start taking a look at the final result in the movie. As you can see, the challenge was to build a big soap bubble moving around the body of the dancing actors and reacting to their motion, and the two bubbles have to interact each other. They have to consider collisions, the position of the collisions between them. So tonight we are going to cover how to build a system for a single character, but it is exactly the same for two or more characters. So let's go forward for that. The first thing to do is to find a good reference. As you can see here, I found a very interesting video on YouTube. This is a huge soap bubble and it is very dynamic. It is really unstable and very particular. Here I could get all the details on the typical motion of these big soap bubbles, and it was very important to have this real reference to get the final result. So let's go to OpenMax. We can load my start scene where I prepared the elements to build our system. Let's take a look at the layers. The first layer is a ball rig, where we have the geometries and the deforming elements that will control our solution. I use the geosphere geometry because we need a geometry that has a constant structure, because we need to build something extremely dynamic that moves and changes the shape and the position and the rotation a lot of times, and the classic sphere, it can't work for that because the top side is different by the other sides, and we need something that also, if we rotate and align in another direction, maintain its structure as it was. And I built two spheres because one is the driver of our system and the other one is the real dynamic system. So basically this solution is how to drive a dynamic system in a keyframed way. And then I built a freeform deformer, an FFD. I used the spacework one and not the modifier one, because we want to assign a deformation to our system, but we want that the deformation remains ever the same also if we rotate and move the geometry. Then we have this sphere, one more sphere. It is a service object. This object basically controls the dimensions of the freeform objects, the deformers. As you can see, I rigged the dimension of the three axes of the FFD objects, and I used the radius of this guy. And then on this guy, I assigned a script operator. If we open the track editor on the rotation axis, there is a script operator with a script that basically reads the position of this ball and the animation and the radius, and he converts all this data into rotation data for the geometry. So basically, if we go to animate the further object, that everything is linked to that help object. So if we animate that one, we can see that the ball rotates in a realistic way. And basically, we have the sensation that the ball is rolling on a table, on a surface, and it is basically a fake. It is not dynamic for real, but it is exactly what we want for our system, because we will use this guy to drive the dynamic one, and the better we move the driver, better the dynamic one will act. The other layers, we have the character with the bones with Character Studio. I choose Character Studio that is quick to manage motion capture data, and I choose a free model from internet with a dancing girl and assign the motion capture data that is more than 1000 frames, and she acts very crazy, so it is very good for our system. This will stress enough our dynamic system, so it is what we want. And the next step is to take our master driver object and assign to this object the body-centric position and animation of our body. And we want to do this fully procedural because we don't want to track manually 1000 frames. So we are going to approach this with thinking particles, and let's create one thinking particle system, and let's open the viewport. We can create our group. We call it average position, and it is better we load. I already have a system that does this. It is a black box I call average position. So let's analyze what we have inside. If we create one particle with a box shape, just to visualize it, it is the pink one. And then we have three different ways to average the position. Average by 3, by 4, and by 5 points. In this case, we use the by 3 points. 3 points is enough. So we select the first node, and we check the first foot, the second foot, and then for the third node we assign the little helper on top of the head of the characters, and we see our particle already positioned. So we read the x and y only data, we don't care about the z, and we do an average of all these elements, and we basically get the body-centric position that we want, and we assign it back to the particle. Once we have this, basically we are ready to export back that particle to our scene. And we need that to drive our main rig system. Then when it's ready, we go to the export node, and we set the quality to 100, and we export it, and thinking particle will create a geometry, an animated geometry inside Max. Okay, now we have our animated geometry inside Max, and let's go to analyze. We have a key per frame, and we want to move this x and y animation data from the thinking particle object to our main control object. So we do it with the track editor. We select copy the x-axis animation, and we select paste copy on the controller object. We do the same for x and y axis, and once we have the animation data, we go to clean the z-axis for our main control object. We don't want to have any z animation. So there is one more thing to do. Because thinking particle exports linear animated data, we have to convert these guys back to Bezier float data. So we assign back the Bezier float controller on each axis. And after this, we are going to select all the keyframes and move them into smooth mode. So we don't want to have auto Bezier, we want to have smooth Bezier. Okay, we assign this guy, and once we did this, the last step is to reduce the amount of keyframes. So we create a 7, we add a 7 reduction, and as you can see, we have a very smooth animation data now, and it is what we want. As you can see, our main control object basically follows what our character does, but it follows in a very smooth way, and it is enough. Okay, now we are ready to build the real thinking particle system. So let's create one more thinking particle, and let's open the thinking particle UI, and let's start to approach our system. So first of all, okay, let's take a look at our elements. We want to drive from inside thinking particles, and okay, let's create some groups as a first step, and let's name them. The first one we want to call it drive. This is the one that will drive the dynamic elements. And joint drive, this works in conjunction with the drive object. Here we will have all the dynamic elements involved in the bullet physics, so we call it BT for bullet. Then we have the colliders group that has two subgroups for make different settings for the dynamics. Then we have the cloth, that is exactly the dynamic element we want to drive, and the joint cloth, that are the joints that will help to rig our cloth. And then we have our check group. This is just a service group for debugging, just in case. Here we will have subgroups called hand and body. Okay, we can consider this one. I didn't show you this layer first. This is the colliders layer. Here we have some geometries, basic geometries that basically envelope each bone of the character, and these are the real elements that will interact with our dynamic system, and they are wider than the geometry to make our solution better. So let's start some colors on the groups, just to assign some characteristics, some visual characteristics. So let's put some colors. These colors are totally personal, so you can color as you want. Don't care about this. For the cloth, we have light color, but for the joint cloth we want to have a full red color, because we really want to see what they do, and it is important. This is very important group. And check is just light color. So let's use dots for most of them. For the joint cloth we want to have drops, because drops shows you the speed of the object in the viewport in real time, so this is very useful. And cloth will be our actor. So for the colliders we just want to see the mesh, so we don't want to see anything else. And joint will be ticks, and drive will be ticks as well. This is enough for now. You can change these parameters whenever you want, so don't be extremely precise. So we created our first dynamic system that will be our black box, and we call it bubble. And inside bubble we are going to start to create our elements. First of all, we want to have a memory node, and we want to call it master, or you can call it anything you want. Okay, let's leave it as it is for now. We create an integer, we call it ID, This will be the responsible of our joint connections. Then a position node, we call it pose, we will use for create acceleration data. So let's start to create our first dynamic system. We call it ball rig, and inside this one we can create our main control nodes. In this particular moment we want to control the driving geometries and the elements from the max rig. So for do this we use one of my favorite nodes, is called paramblock. Paramblock does exactly this. It lets you control anything inside max from inside thinkingParticle. Any parameter of any element present in max that exists inside max can be driven by inside thinkingParticle. This is very powerful when you want to create complex systems and complex rigs. So we clone it 5 times, we connect the own parameter and we start to assign to the elements in our scene. The order is totally casual, so you don't have to respect the order I assigning. So let's assign some names so we remember what we are touching. So the name will respect the object we selected. So for cloth we will call it cloth, and from on the roll object we will call it roll, and so on. So we have a better view once we have to go to debug or to check parameters. So it is ever better to name what you're doing. Otherwise, after a while, you do not recognize what you're doing. So let's start to assign some controls. On the noise, we want to control the scale and the strength and the velocity of the noise. As you can see, the velocity, it's invisible. This is because the noise space warp is legacy max stuff. It comes from the max 1, release 1. So not everything is really well supported but inside paramblock, but it will work. It just missed the name, but it will work. So don't worry about that. So we go to the other elements. On the roll, we want to control the radius and the Z position. Basically, we want to have the Z position for all of the elements, but the noise. So Z position for everyone, and a radius and segment for the 2 drive objects, so the drive and the cloth. So once again here, Z position and radius and segments. And on the FFD, Z position, yeah. And I miss one step on this space warp. Basically, we want to have a gradual change of the deforming grid. So the best way to do it is to use a morph modifier. So basically, we assign the deformation gradually, and we can also animate it if we want. So this opens the door to several tricks. And this is a very efficient and fast way to control the deformation of FFD space warp. So this is the reason why I use a morph modifier. So let's go back to our setup, and now we find the morph modifier, and we check the morph key we just created. So let's start to connect the other values we just created. So we can start with the Z position and the radius. About the Z position, we need to do one more trick. We will use the math node. It is a new and a very powerful node that lets you do mathematical operation between matrix, vectors, scalars, floats, and shows you on the title which operation you're doing. So this is very powerful and helpful to maintain everything tied and readable. So we add the radius to the z position, and we feed the z position of all of the other elements because we want to have offset control about the position in about the z position of the whole rig, so all the bolts and the FFD and all the other elements connected. So we control them all together, and just in case we have problem of compenetration between the ground and the feet, or other problem like that, we can have an adjustment with this tool. So let's go on. We can connect all the other remaining data. So we go to control the strength, the scale, and the velocity of the noise, space warp. Okay, about the strength, we need to create one more node. It's a 0.3 math node because the strength is a vector, so it needs 3 values. And okay, we will use just one value, and we clone the same value on the other 2 axes. So we will have a unique parameter to control the whole strength. And let's go to connect the remaining elements. Okay, the morph key port, it takes too much space, so we can rename it to save space in the our interface. We rename the noise velocity with noise vel, so it is no more invisible. And then we can move back to our main control panel and create time interval. This is basically a trigger, so you specify at which frame you want to start our simulation. So it is very useful to set one element like this, so we can have better control on the whole setup. So let's create 2 more math node. One is the float and the other one is the integer. Basically, these ones are the responsible of the parameters we are going to assign. So they are the real one where we store the values. So we clone them several times and we assign. We will rename them later. Let's shrink them down to save space to make our control panel more compact and useful. So we keep cloning several of them because we want to have them before any other dynamic system. So they have to exist first of all because the order in the execution, it is important inside thinkingParticles. So we rename some of them. Okay, let's put some good spacing between them. Let's adjust a bit. Okay, so we have to uncheck edit on the fly and force setting. As you can see, now everything is at 0. There are 0 on all the parameters, so we need to start to specify some parameters. There are no polygons, no dimensions, so we have to go to say how many polygons our spheres will have and how big they will be, how big will be the noise, how big will be the the deforming from the FFD. So we start to set up our system. So we will have node z offset for now, and okay, there are some mismatching naming. Let's correct them. It is very important every time to keep assigning naming in the correct way. Okay, it's not working. Why? FFD, everything is present. It's okay, it's connected. Maybe it's my mistake. Let's check. Yeah, we didn't assign the space warp to the geometry. So space warp is not like a modifier, and you need to assign it to the geometry that you want to control. So it wasn't assigned. So now it works, as you can see, and yeah, the setup looks ready to go. So let's hide the elements, and let's play our little animation. As you can see, the roll and the driver ball roll exactly as we want, and at the same time the FFD deformer keeps the deformation, the grid of deformation remains ever the same. So we have the perception that our driving grid flows inside that deformation, rolling on the ground. So this is exactly what we were looking for. As you can see now, you feel that the overall motion of the bubble follows the main movement of the body. Here you can see how the Z position works. So this is basically an offset on the overall position of all the elements. And you can see with one parameter we control the whole rig, and this is basically it is what we need. Okay, let's check that all the other elements and nodes are working fine, just to be sure. Everything looks okay, in place. So we can move forward, and okay, let's move these two guys up. Now is the moment to create some more dynamic sets and to rename them. We are going to rename just first the emission ones. We can call them emit colliders, emit geometry, and emit joints. These are basically the three emission sets we are going to prepare. So let's start with the emit colliders. Here we will use an amazing new tool. It's called layer to particles, that basically brings everything inside a layer into thinking particle and lets you transform into particles. So it works just using the name of the layer. So we can specify the name into the layer string box. So we just copy the name, and boom, we have all the elements inside that layer transformed into particles, basically. One more amazing thing is that we can filter them. Okay, we assign to collide, but we can filter them with that node string. So if we want to use just the capsule, we can type cap, and we isolate, yes, just that guys. Plus we say object to particle tracking, and we get also the animation, and that's amazing. It's fast and clean. So now is the moment to create some ballet stuff. So we go to create our main ballet physics node. It is the engine basically. And yeah, we assign the main group BT, so all the dynamic stuff. Deflector, we don't use it because we don't have, at least in this tutorial. We will have ERP to maximum, 20 iterations, and we leave all the rest as it is. It's okay. So we jump back to our emit collider node, and now we can create some rigid body stuff. So we create the rigid body node, we assign the ballet engine, we go to check convex hull and the kinematic. We use kinematic with 0 everything, but the margin we will set to 10. And it is important, that parameter, because that one specified to ballet engine a kind of envelope area around the surface where he should pay more attention to avoid mistakes, or like you know, interpenetrations or unwanted results. So we rename these nodes to save space. We set these guys as a kinematic because we want to have them as a influence, animated geometry, animated rigid body. So we clone it 4 times, and we go to change the filtering. So we basically are going to create 4 different sets of colliders. So we create one for the body, for the trunk of the body only, another set one is just for the feet, another one is for the hands and the head. So we have 4 different ones where we'll go to specify different margin parameters, because you know we want to have stuff like the hands and the head that have more a wider margin area, where the ballet engine will have more space to correct issues in case they will appear. So let's rename some of them, so we will have a good view of what we are doing, and let's go to assign some parameters. We leave the arm as it is. We go to assign 15 to the body, and the feet is okay to 10, and the hands and the head as well 15. This is enough for now. We are going to fix later if it's needed. The next step is the emit geometry. For this one we are going to use the object to particle node. We clone it because we want to have one for the driver and one for the cloth. So we assign the geometry, the objects to the separate nodes. So on the cloth one we assign the cloth group, and we don't want to track any animation, we just want to have the shape. And for the drive we want to have both the shape and the animation. And let's see why we cannot see in the viewport. Let's double check everything. We cannot see. Let's show the original objects. Yes, no, we're still not visible. Let's check why. Okay, let's pick drive again. Okay, we have it, and no, it is not that one. Okay, probably, oh yeah, we forgot to show the mesh for the drive object. let's go here. Okay, lost the assignment. Sometimes it happens. Okay, and here we go. So we have the object visible, and it's tracking the animated one inside Max. So we renamed this one with the drive name. Okay, and in this other one, we call it cloth. We are going to add some characteristics. So we had the mass, because this is a dynamic object, and mass is fundamental for dynamics. And we had the material node, because we want to assign a little shader to better view on the viewport, and we assign the soft body, bullet soft body. Okay, bullet physics. Then we set 0 for everything, 0, 1 for push stiffness, maximum volume conservation, 10 iterations, margin of 5, and friction 0, and hardness to the maximum, and anchor to 0, because now we are going to expose pull stiffness and anchor hardness, and we move them outside because we want to control this parameter from the outside. Then we want to assign the shader to the material. This is very simple shader, very basic, with a lot of specularity, and Fresnel with nothing on the dark channel, and with the animated map on the white channel. And it is very basic, very simple, and it works in real time in the viewport as well. So this is good for what we want to do. And as you can see in the viewport, yeah, it looks like it behaves like a soap bubble, basically. It's a good reference, visual reference. So let's move back to our setup and assign the two float values to the parameters that we exposed before. We are going to set the values later on these guys, and okay, it is now moment to create export node. So we create an ABC, Alembic dynamic set, where we store an Alembic export, and then we after bullet we create one more dynamic. We call it right position. It is there to create frame before information for some particles. So we want to know, thanks to this trick, the position of the particles at the frame before the actual we are running. And this happens because we moved this guy at the end of the stack. So at the end of the stack, this records the position of the particles. Then everything will be executed on the frame after, and he still stores the data of the frame before. So this is important to do several tricks. In this case, we want to have it for acceleration data. So let's do some adjustments in the position of the nodes. Let's keep things tidy. And now we can start to approach the emit joints. So we create a position board. This is very nice node. We use the joint drive as a group, and well, we rename it as joint drive as well. We put a pistol shot 1 per call, and we set a life very long, and with 0 everything else, and we assign a shape, a standard shape with a box, a cube. It's okay. And now okay, we expose just the on and the position and the sides. Okay, and now we can clone it and rename it for the cloth, because we want to have the join cloth and the drive join drive exactly the same in the emission. And we specify a sphere for the join cloth, and as well for this one parameters remain exactly the same. Then we add a mass to our join cloth, because these guys are dynamics. So when the drive are just kinematic joints, the join cloth will be dynamic. So we have to assign dynamic properties. So also in this one we have the memory node. So we want to initialize the memory values. So we initialize the position, and later on we will do the same with the ID. So now let's go into create an iterator, that is a node that repeats several times an operation that you specify. So we expose the on and the count, and we go to assign the on outside. So we want to use the trigger we built before, and now okay, we have everything. So now is the moment to use the geometry nodes, that are some of the most powerful nodes I use in thinkingParticles. So object lets you feed the scene with everything from outside or from inside thinkingParticle. In this case we are feeding directly with a group, the drive group. And later on we want to query the geometry of the drive shape, and from that we want to know the number of vertices, and we feed the number of vertices into the count of the iterator. So basically we say to the iterator, emit a shot per vertex, and the position born will receive the shot from the iterator. So basically we emit one particle each one vertex. So once we have this, we use the geometry vertex, and that one will give us the information about the position of each vertex in the shape. So we are going to emit the particles on the position as well, and at the same time he generates the vertex ID. He reads the ID from the geometry and assigns the same ID to our particles. Then let's do the final step. Let's assign the bullet rigid body to our join particles. Let's rename it as well to save space. And yeah, let's assign the bullet physics, set it as a convex hull, leave it as active, and 0 everything about the margin. That will be 1 in this case, it's okay, and 0 all the rest. So let's analyze once again this little setup. So we get the shape from the group, then we feed the shape into the geometry object, and then we read the vertices, and we emit one particle per vertex, and we check the position of the vertex, and we assign the same ID of the vertices to the both particles. So this is fundamental, because with this system we are safely assigning the same ID to the particles that belongs by the same vertex, and so we create a very strong pairing system. If you notice, we have just one group with the ID assigned, and this is because we need to make the other group follow the animated drive object first, and then we can reassign the same ID. Otherwise, the position procedure will mix them randomly, so we are going to lose the correct pairing. So let's create a P pass AB, and we store on the first one we say join drive, and the second one we use the drive. So we use a particle data with position exposed, and we use a surface position node, and we will feed the drive geometry into the particle shape, and from that one we will get the position of the vertices. So we don't need to touch anything, we just remove the look around, and that's it. Now our join driver particles will follow on each frame the position of the vertices of the drive animated geometry. I can't see them. 5 ticks. Okay, not sure. Join drive. Okay, maybe we missed this guy. Yeah. So yeah, we have to. So we plug the on value. And put this in the middle. So we go to. Okay. So for the mass, we want to have a very, very light. Okay, let's do this first. Let's invert. Okay. Our size is 1. It's okay. We don't touch it anymore. Float is a mass. For now, we put it 0.02. It's okay. We want to have very, very light stuff, and we want to size as mass activated. This is fundamental, otherwise everything will be messed up. We do the same here. Okay, let's disable the agent body for now. Okay, let's check. Let's double check if everything is working. If everything is okay, or we did some mistake, or I don't know. Everything look correct. This is okay. This is okay. This is okay. Okay. Everything looks okay. Let's check again. This is okay. Let's try flakes, maybe. No. No. Okay, particles are not emitted. Let's check why. Maybe I don't know. I'm missing something in somewhere. It's almost done. Count number of vertices. Okay. Why? we should see something. Right. Come on, where are you? Geometry, geometrics, vertex ID, yeah. Position, and vertex ID. Good. Yeah, now we finally see the guys. Okay. So we have this one. Okay, we missed the rigid body dynamics. Setup. So let's see the other particles. Okay, these are okay. Everything is okay. And we want to see the red ones, the cloth joints. So we still cannot see them. Let's do okay. Show mesh. Why don't you show? Join. Okay, it was the wrong group. And here we go. Here we go. We see the red ones as well. So let's move them to drops again. And okay, everything is fine. Okay. Yes, that's correct. Everything is correct. Rigid body, yes, everything to 0, margin to 1. That's okay. And ID is okay. Everything is okay. So let's check the mass is okay. Everything is fine.
Sir, please allow us to go kick some ass.